All right. Well, today we are excited to have Robert Cunningham on the podcast. Robert, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing great. Doing great. Hey, Robert, I just love to dive in. Can you give us a little bit of your story and how you got to where you are right now at Tates Creek?
Yeah, you bet. Born and raised in Lexington, Kentucky. And my church, Tates Creek Presbyterian, is in Lexington. Born and raised in Lexington, Kentucky. Just found out you're from Hazard, which I love. I grew up in a nominally Christian home. I would say, we went to church and whatnot. And so it was a pretty central part of my childhood, but into adolescence and teenage years, kind of fell away from that. And really had a season of rebellion and my parents were going through a divorce, just a lot of stuff going on, heavy stuff. And I, as many do, I sought to kind of numb that out with a lot of bad decisions that I regret. Anyway, I had a young life leader. I don't know if you're familiar with Young Life Ministry, but I had a young life leader who befriended me and loved me well and invited me to a camp. And when I went to a Young Life camp, it was after my senior year of high school. I went to a Young Life camp, and kind of the way God's providence works. I was getting to the bottom of some decisions I was making, reaping the fruit of sinful choices, feeling broken, and in need of something. Didn't know what that was, and that converged with going to this Young Life camp, and gospel was presented clearly, as Young Life does so well. And I went to that camp one person and came back a different person. Not all conversions are that radical. I like boring testimonies more than mine, but mine was absolutely, I came home and people were like, who is this person who can't stop talking about Jesus? And kind of went into wild, Jesus freak stage where I was, evangelizing everybody, and kind of missed some of those lovely childlike impulses that I had. But it was exactly what you'd expect. And that was right before I went off to college. I went to Murray State in Western Kentucky, and through good friendship and discipleship groups and campus ministries and whatnot, just really those formative years in college, I grew in the Lord a ton. And that's where I kind of ended up in this strange world of PCA, a Presbyterian Church in America. What happened was very common route for a lot of people in my generation, got exposed to John Piper, who kind of introduced me to, big God theology, glory of God. Learned that from Piper. But what happened is I started to get into, some of his writings, and then that kind of expanded out to greater circles of Reformed thought. And I started to realize, all these guys are quoting Presbyterians. Who are these Presbyterians? And so I started going back to the stuff that influenced Piper and these guys, and kind of by my own self studies landed in the doctrine of Reformed Presbyterianism. And that led me to Covenant Seminary, which is the denominational seminary of the PCA in St. Louis, to get my master's of divinity. And then as God would have it, I never saw this coming. As soon as I was graduating from Covenant, a position here at TCPC opened. And so I ended up coming back to my hometown, and I've been ministering in my hometown now for 15 years. I was hired as a youth and assistant pastor, but transitioned into this senior leadership 8 years ago. Has it been 8 or 9 years ago? It's crazy. And so I've been senior pastor here since, and my job title's changed a little bit since then. Now I'm the pastor of preaching and vision. It frees me up to do, I'm at the beginning of some doctoral studies, and I do a lot of public work, public thought and whatnot. So my job title has changed a little bit, but same church, Lexington, Kentucky is what I know and love. And this congregation, I love this congregation, and I'm a happy pastor of a happy church. Not many can say that, but I get to say that.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the ways that maybe listeners, people might be familiar with is during your tenure as pastor, abuse allegations were brought forward of a former pastor.
Correct.
And the way that you handled that, people look to as really the standard, the model for how churches should respond to these allegations, because your commitment from the very beginning was tell the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, I have somehow become, having conversations like this that we're having right now has been a part of my routine. Our church, and I do want to emphasize our church. I certainly am the one that does the interviews and gets the calls and whatnot, but it really was a team effort in how we navigated those waters. But yes, and something I never saw coming, that's kind of become one of the things our church has been known for, and I suppose specifically I've become known for. What happened was we had a former pastor. The reason I was able to be hired is he had just left, and so I filled his position. A former pastor, where allegations were brought to us, and we can get in, if you want to, we can get into what happened, what transpired, and how we responded, and all that. But we made some unconventional decisions on how we were going to respond, and it was, there was parts of that were scary and were steps of faith, but the Lord has really blessed it, and we're thankful that. Not only are we thankful, I mean, yes, of course, we're thankful that we can be a resource to other churches, and however, as you mentioned, as an example of that, we're thankful for that. That's the one that saddens me a little bit, because I don't think what we did should be exceptional. I think it should be the norm, and so I hate it. Part of me just it saddens me when people say, "Oh, here's one church that did it." You know, I think I appreciate that, and but I don't think people realize that I don't like it as much. I wish we weren't the exception. But anyway, but more than that, the people who were abused in our congregation found the process to be healing, and that's why I'm grateful for how it worked out. They felt loved, they felt defended, and it brought a lot of healing that they didn't think was possible. And then as it happens, and I can't talk in detail about this one because it's still ongoing, but then sure enough, right on the other side of that investigation, new allegations came out about a musician that was that this former pastor was friends with, and so he led music at our retreats and whatnot. And some more allegations came to us because of how he handled the previous one. This person came forward and said, "Hey, I need to tell you this happened," and it was credible. And so we're in another independent investigation right now, which is heartbreaking. But yeah, it has become a part of the calling that I did not anticipate. But it's been an honor to walk with those who have been hurt by the church, both from our church specifically from that period, but also those who have come to our church because of this reputation you speak of. And it's been an honor to come alongside them and do our best to help.
Yeah. I believe you use this phrase. You made a series of unconventional decisions.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through what were some of those?
You bet. So let me just walk you through them. The first one was I was notified of these allegations because this former pastor was pastoring in Savannah, Georgia, and it came out in his church. In the Presbyterian Church. Our governing body is called a presbytery. So a presbytery, which is just kind of a collection of elders from that geographic location. presbytery notified me that, and this is one of the things I am thankful for. I'll plug Presbyterianism. This is one of the things I am thankful for. If we were kind of an independent deal, I never would have known this. But a presbytery in Savannah, Georgia, notified me that said, "Hey, we just want you to know that a former pastor that was at your church has been defrocked, which is stripped of his ordination, because of sexual abuse." Here's unconventional thing number one. We could have very easily said, well, he was here forever ago. It had been over a decade since he had been there. This took place in Savannah. We've never heard anything like that took place here. We could have said, that's sad. Pray for them. We're not necessarily, we don't have to look into it here. He's not here on staff, and he was forever ago and all that. And to our church leadership's credit, we all said, you know what, we need to look into this. And so we did. We immediately called a congregational meeting and notified them of what had come to our attention. We immediately, obviously, notified the authorities. And then we invited folks. We basically said, before we did our independent investigation, we kind of did our own. Hey, we just want to know, has anybody, this is what's come to our attention. We told the congregation, we reached out to people who were not at our church anymore, but were in his ministry. And we simply said, this has come to our attention. We want to make sure that anybody had an experience like this while he was here, we want to know about it. We promise you it will be safe. We just want to know if there is more that we need to do here. And very quickly, we realized we were kind of the epicenter of his abuse. Mm-hmm. And so unconventional step number 2, we could have handled that ourselves. We could have said, ooh, that's bad. Let's try to get these people some help maybe. Or we could have said, sorry that happened, but it happened over a decade ago. We're not liable for it anymore. There's just so many ways we could have done. And unconventional step 2, we decided to contract with an outside independent investigation. And Grace is the name of the organization. And invite people in to get to the bottom of it and tell us where we failed and repent where we need to repent. And we did that publicly. We apologized to victims publicly, survivors of abuse. We apologized to our city publicly. And we opened ourselves up to transparency. What we did, and I don't know how we came across this, our leadership. This is, again, I want to keep saying we, because it wasn't just me. What we did is we said, churches or Christian institutions, when this happens, they typically prioritize their own institution first, then the public perception second, and then the victims last. And we said, we want to flip that. Everything we want to do, we want to do this. First, we want to ask, what would the survivors have us do? Second, we want to ask, what would we have the watching world? What would we want them to see? And then last, we'll worry about what this means for our church. And that paradigm flipped made all the difference in the world. And we just filtered every decision we made through, what would survivors want? What does the world need to see? And then I'm sure it'll have ramifications for our church. And the little pithy creed that came out of that was righteousness over reputation. Every time, righteousness over reputation. So anyway, I don't know if that helps, if that's what you're asking for, but that's what we did.
Oh, that's really helpful. And at any point, I mean, it doesn't sound like it, but at any point, was anybody behind the scenes, you talk about your team, your staff, was anybody hesitant? Was anybody, hesitant towards that kind of?
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I don't want, let's be clear here. We're like everybody else. It's scary.
Yeah.
Listen, I understand why institutions want to circle the wagons and hide and protect the institution. I totally understand that. And we had meetings where we were like, are we sure, like, this is what we're going to do? I remember we had, if you go, and after this talk, or you may have seen it, you can read kind of all of our public communication is still on our website. Mm-hmm. All of the stuff that we did is kind of condensed down into one thing. We did that because we get so many requests for that. We just put it all on one page of our website. But if you look at the public communication, you will see what I drafted and what I wrote to the community publicly went way above and beyond what any attorney would tell you to do. In fact, we had attorneys say, do not do this. Here's what you should do. You should say, it's come to our attention that allegations have been made of a former pastor. We are conducting an independent investigation. That's all you need to say. And going back to our paradigm, so, well, wait, what would survivors want us to say? Would they want it to feel like a tiny little lawyer approved thing that we hide on our website or something like that? Or would they want us to come forward? What does the watching world need? Wouldn't it be refreshing if the watching world heard a church apologize to them that their pastor was abusing people in their community? And then, okay, yeah, it's gonna embarrass us, and it may hurt our reputation. Okay, that's our last priority. We don't, that's what we're priority. So what we did is we did that, and I vividly remember being in meetings where we saying, we don't have to do this. Like we are allowed. We have to do an independent investigation. We're not going to be that church that tries to hide this. We have to do the minimum. But I remember saying, "Are y'all sure we want to like tell on ourselves on this level?" It's embarrassing. It's vulnerable. It's whatever. And I remember the day of hitting publish. No, I didn't. But our tech guy hitting publish and saying, okay, it's on the website. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness. And it was scary. So yes, to answer your question, we never had anybody saying, I'm proud of I'm going to use the term we use. It's called session. That's our body of elders in a Presbyterian church. So we have a session and we have a pastoral team. We didn't have anybody on our session or our pastoral team that was wanting to do unethical stuff with it. Not even a hint of it. Nobody was wanting to say, let's bury this, let's hide this. What we had was, are we sure we want to go this above and beyond? That was the scary part for everybody. Not everybody, but a lot of people, including me. And after praying and discussing, we always landed on, yes, let's go above and beyond what's required and fight for the survivors of abuse that in our church.
Yeah. And so it was just that commitment of the truth that, hey, we're just going to continue down the path of transparency no matter what.
Yeah. And here's the thing. Here's what churches, and you're committed to transparency because it's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Truth is right. The truth will set you free. Now the truth will freak you out and disturb you first, but it will set you free. So you do it because it's right. But here's the other thing that I just don't think churches and Christian institutions get. Not only is it right principally, but practically, I don't think they understand this. Practically, this is the better move. And here's what I mean. I have a friend. Well, you're from Kentucky. You're not a big Kentucky fan, but do you follow Kentucky sports radio at all? Do you know who Matt Jones is for Kentucky?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know Matt Jones. Yeah. Okay. Well, for those watching in who aren't from Kentucky, Matt Jones he's the big public voice in our state. Everybody knows him. He's Kentucky sports radio, and we're all obsessed with Kentucky sports in Kentucky. All right. He and I have developed a friendship over, I actually write for his site some, and we've become friends, and he obviously knows public stuff. And so I reached out to him. This is another unconventional step. Why don't you reach out to people who are experts in stuff that you're not experts in? Like, I have no idea how to do public statements and all this stuff. Well, I reached out to him and I said, all right, you deal with public all the time. You're in the media. You're a leading media voice in our state. What would you do if you're in my situation? And I'll never forget, he said to me, Robert, here's what churches don't get. Either you tell a story or people like me tell the story. If I were in your shoes, I'd rather tell the story than let me get to the bottom of it and tell the story. Because the media we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to connect dots. We're going to talk to people. We're going to get to the bottom of it, and then we're going to tell it. Why wouldn't you just tell on yourselves? And I said, why not? It's not like Kentucky's going to talk about this. The Herald Leader's going to talk about this. Why don't we talk about it? Now, principally, you do that because we're followers of Jesus and you tell the truth. That's what we do. But practically, it was incredibly freeing to not worry about who's going to find out what. If you just tell on yourself, they got nothing to gossip about.
Yeah.
And if you're just transparent, the media, there's nothing to find. And I was so freeing, I'd get media requests and whatnot. It was so freeing for me to say, we've literally said everything that we know. You're welcome to read the statement again. I'm hiding nothing from you. And when the report comes out, we will release it fully and you'll know it the day I know it. That is incredibly freeing. I can sleep well at night, not worrying about who's going to find what out.
Yeah. But so many times you just look and you see people do not seem to be committed to that level of transparency. I mean, we were even talking before we, started to record. You see this right now in the Southern Baptist Convention, and you see it in all kinds of different, organizations, denominations, ministries, and they would say they're committed to truth and they might have great doctrinal statements. But so many times things like this come up and they just take the opposite steps that you guys took. Can you talk about that? Can you talk about what does it look like for a church to be just committed to the truth and not just a doctrinal statement on a website, but hey, we're committed to it.
Yeah, everybody's committed to truth until you have to tell on yourself. Everybody's committed to justice until the source of injustice is you. Everybody's committed to holiness until the unrighteousness and unholiness is in your midst. And then we lose those commitments. So, I am big on applying the Sermon on the Mount, not just individually, but institutionally. And what I mean by that is just, I'm big on self-critique, personally, because I think Jesus asked me to do that. I think Jesus not asks, he gets to tell me what to do. Jesus tells me that I need to stop looking at the speck in somebody else's eyes, and I need to remove the plank from mine. That I'm constantly looking inward. I'm constantly walking this journey of repentance and self-critique. And but I think Jesus doesn't want just individuals to function that way. I think Jesus wants institutions that bear his name, certainly churches in his name. I think he wants them to function that way too. And so what that means is I get accused. The biggest accusation I get is that I'm too hard on conservatives and I'm too kind to progressives. And I say, guilty as charged, you're right. Conservatism is my tribe. Conservative evangelical. I'm a conservative evangelical. I'm not ashamed to say that. And so because of that, my critiques tend to go in that direction. And so, I just think principally, not only are we committed to the truth, I think Jesus would take it a second level up and say, you are committed to looking first at the falsehoods within your own life and within your own institution. And so it's not just when it comes to things like sexual abuse, it comes across the board. What are the hypocrisies within my life, within Tates Creek Presbyterian Church, within the PCA, within conservative evangelical? I mean, my different hats that I wear, What are the hypocrisies? What are the inconsistencies? Where are we missing it? Where do we need to improve? Where do we need to grow? And so I don't know if I'm answering your original question, but
no, that's great. Yeah.
but yes, all I'm saying is it's one thing to be committed to truth. It's another thing to do it when you're the ones that need to tell the truth on yourself.
And so what do you think it says when you see these networks, denominations, where abuse allegations have risen up, they've come forward?
Yeah.
But it's almost as if the church or denomination, they just see it as a distraction. Hey, let's just focus on the mission and let's just focus on reaching people. And they just want to push it aside. They never want to deal with it. What do you think it says about those groups, churches? What is that revealing right there?
I think it's revealing, again, if I were to critique our tribe, evangelicalism, I think it's revealing a misplaced understanding of the Christian mission. Where and I know you're in the Baptist world. We're in a little bit different worlds. But I think we probably have some commonality in there is when the Great Commission replaced the Great Commandment, things got messy for evangelicalism. When it became all about evangelizing and reaching the nations and growing it, and not what Jesus says there, where he says, teaching them to obey all that I have commanded. Well, what you commanded a lot. What did you obey? What do you want us to obey? Well, I'll sum it up for you. Love God, love your neighbor. So you can't be faithful to the Great Commission without strict adherence to the Great Commandment to love God and neighbor. And so if the mission, if you define the mission as the expansion, yes, of the gospel, which leads to the fruit of more love for God and more love for neighbor, then binding up the broken and doing justice and loving the abused and rebuking the abuser, dealing with these things, these are not inconveniences and distractions to the mission. They're at the very heart of the mission. They are the mission. And so, listen, ministry, when the first allegations came to us, our church was growing. We were planting churches. Financially, we were healthy. And our mission, our vision, all that stuff, man, we were flourishing. And we literally had to shut things down for a year. Not worship, not our commitments, but literally our focus for a whole year in our session meetings, in my pastoral meetings, my personal time, a year was devoted to these abuse allegations. And I think that is doing mission just as much as the previous year when we planted a church. So, I think it's just a misplaced understanding or misplaced priority, which is a misunderstanding of our mission in the world as followers of Jesus.
Yeah. You've got a great episode of your podcast. You host the podcast Every Square Inch. You've got a great episode of that about sexual abuse in the church.
Yeah.
And one of the things you talk about is church structure, the way churches and denominations are structured. Can you talk about what are some structures that churches, denominations, networks can have that actually can be a place where abuse can happen and it might grow and just stay and it's never dealt with? There's no accountability. Can you talk about those structures and maybe not even talk about those, but what are some changes that you would say need to be made to structures where abuse is allowed to just fester and live?
Yeah. It's a big thing. I talk often about churches, because pastoral leadership offers so much access to the vulnerable, it is ripe for predators. And because it offers so much attention and praise, it is ripe for narcissists. And so ministry is filled with abusers, spiritual abuse, sexual abuse, narcissistic tendencies and whatnot. And I don't know if we're going to be able to change the nature of the calling, and meaning you can't take church authority away, or it's unfaithful to how God struck. You can't take that. You can't just say, well, we're going to do away with authority. We're not going to ask people to submit to spiritual authority. We're not going to ask them to take membership vows and whatnot. You can't do that. That's fundamental to what it means to be a part of a church. But how you do authority, you can absolutely put safeguards in to prevent these types of situations from taking place. I think, it's hard. Like in your world, I'd be interested to turn the interview around and start asking you questions, because I don't know how. In my world, it's basically saying we are going to be faithful to the ecclesial structure of Presbyterianism. I'm a Presbyterian, not because, yes, I believe in, the Reformed stuff, which I would have in common with a lot of SBC brothers and sisters, but I'm not a Presbyterian. I think people think, oh, you're a Presbyterian because you believe all this, but you also baptize babies. Well, we do that, but to be a Presbyterian is a commitment to an ecclesial model. That's what a Presbyterian is. A Presbyterian in the Greek is elder, and we're committed to an elder. And what that means is that I in my church have to submit to the plurality of a session of elders. And these are not my yes men. They're not my staff. My staff are not my elders. They are ordained leadership from within our congregation that literally they're in charge of. I don't have a vote. They vote on things. I don't vote on things. I have to submit to them. And then our elders have to live in submission to our presbytery, and our presbytery has to live in submission to the General Assembly. And so in our situation, you just have to be faithful to the model. I mean, you can skirt the model and you get around the model, not for long. That's what happened, where this pastor ended up getting disciplined by his presbytery, and then they notified us. But you just got to be faithful to the model. In your context, and then I think in greater evangelicalism, and then I think in, like, when I think of Christian institutions and like seminaries and publishing and Together for the Gospel or Gospel Coalition and whatnot, I think you got to get. I think those have to be more creative. I think you've got to, in other words, if you're committed to, if you would disagree with our doctrine of believing that churches need to live in submission to other churches and whatnot, if you really believe that that the church should be an autonomous institution, then I would say to my Baptist brothers and sisters, if you're gonna believe that, which I totally understand that you have those convictions, and I'm totally fine with that, and I've heard folks show me from Scripture why they believe in that, but I would just say, if you do believe in that, then you have got to, more than any other place, you have got to independently get structures in place to hold authority accountable. And you're going to have to think creatively about how you're going to do that while holding on to your doctrine of autonomy. Because personally, I think autonomy is one of the biggest reasons why there's so much abuse in the church, because we are able to form these little weird subcultures that seem normal to us, and the rest of the world is like, y'all are crazy. Like, you have that much like autonomy and freedom, and you don't want to give that. Like, I'm a First Amendment guy. I don't want the government. I'm literally, the doctoral studies I'm doing is in the founding era. I'm a huge believer in the First Amendment, and that I don't want the state having the authority to tell churches what to do. But because of that really, really unique societal freedom that we enjoy, we can be really, really toxic places, and nobody can do anything about And so I just think churches have got to themselves. And what I would tell people, if you're serious about it, you got to do it independently. So if I'm a Baptist, let me put myself in a Baptist church or Baptist seminary or something like that, or a Presbyterian seminary for that matter. Anyway, if I'm there, this is what I'm doing. I am asking independent experts in counsel, folks that are ready and willing to do this, the Baptist world has a resource like Rachel Denhollander, who has walked with us through a lot of stuff. The first thing I would do is I'd get somebody like that, independent, outside, to come in and say, would you evaluate how we do ministry, authority, accountability? Before abuse happens, we're going to bring in the experts to do an independent audit of how we function. Everybody does it after the abuse. Before, I'm going to bring somebody in, look at this. We're opening ourselves up, our procedures and everything up. And we want you to tell us what to do. How do we structure this in such a way that we are held accountable, that we're not going to be this autonomous, protect the leader, protect the reputation of the institution place. We don't want to be that. Tell us what to do. And I would just get outside help to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it seems, speaking inside that Baptist world, it just seems like autonomy is lifted up to the place where just a lot of things are allowed to grow. I think it was even just in the past few days, the SBC came out and said they're not going to make a database of churches where abuse has been brought forward because it would violate church autonomy.
Yeah, I speaking candidly as an outsider who's gotten thrust into your world a little bit, and I don't know if this is the direction you want to go. You can tell me shut up if you want to. But
let's go.
Okay. Well, I have been thrust into the SBC world. You told me that you interviewed my friend Hannah Kate, who has a horrific story that
absolutely
I could start crying about talking. It's awful. And she shared her story in your podcast. Because of her, I've kind of gotten thrusted into the SBC world in trying to advocate for her and defend her and some things. And here's what I've discovered. It's almost impossible to formally do anything in the SBC.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Formally. It's almost impossible to formally. Now, what I would say to any folks in the SBC who have platforms or voices, it's not impossible to informally do so. So in other words, we have church courts that we can do this stuff through. You don't have that. Okay, that's fine. You don't have judicial courts within your ecclesial structure. You do have the court of public opinion. And there is ways to creatively think about how we can informally do some of this stuff. But I've discovered, I'd call godly folks that I really love, and I'm on the same team with these guys. I really love them, and I'd have conversations with them, and I'd say, surely something can be done here, and they say, no, it would violate our doctrine of autonomy. There's no judicial process. There's nothing that I can do. There's nothing we can do. I think, and I don't know if this is even possible within Baptist doctrine. I think I just wish there was one. I wish there was a creative way to hold on to that autonomy that Baptists love, and I totally understand why they love it, and yet have some type of judicial formal process for maybe just this. Maybe if we just said, look, just for abuse, let's be able to, do some church discipline in our midst. I don't know. But it's a real problem. It really is. I really don't know the answer. I don't know how the SBC, how the abuse crisis in the SBC is going to be addressed, because of that one thing that you're talking about, because of this fidelity to autonomy, which I know is very important to Baptists. And so you're going to have to creatively figure out a way to hold on to that, and yet, not let abuse flourish in your midst, because the pastor who abused the pastor abused folks in my church, friends of my church that were abused by him. There is absolutely no way he could ever be ordained in the PCA, do ministry in the PCA. There's just no way. If tomorrow he decided, I want to be a Baptist pastor, he absolutely could drive across the country, apply for a job in Baptist church, and be in. And by the way, this guy's charismatic. He's a leader. You know, he would be an attractive hire, and he could tomorrow be a Baptist pastor on the other side of the country. That's where I don't know what you're going to do with that or about that.
Yeah.
Speaking candidly, sorry, I wasn't. You gave me that door, so, and I'm open to my Baptist friends watching in. I'm open to any and all critiques of the PCA. We have many things to critique.
Yeah, I guess one of the biggest concerns is it just does not look like there's a willingness to even have a conversation about autonomy, and yeah, it's just really.
I'll tell you who I really, well, I don't know. I shouldn't. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know. It's not the world that I'm living in. I'm happy to offer these thoughts. And I told you even before that I've considered maybe just even putting some thoughts out there, some unasked for and perhaps unwelcome thoughts, observations that I've had of being thrust into those dynamics. But, you know, as far as solutions, I don't think I'm the guy to ask. I would ask you do have, I know it because they reach out to me. You do have folks, and it sounds like you're one of them. You do have folks in the SBC that want to figure this out, that want to proactively do it. I think those friends have got to, their voices need to be heard. And I don't know what the process. I don't even know how to do it in your world, but there are a lot that would like to see it addressed. Yeah.
And so, Robert, I want to honor your time. So I guess I guess the last question is, anybody watching this, you know, say a pastor or church leader, what's a place to start? Hey, we want to be committed to the truth no matter what. And maybe they are, you know, maybe it's somebody there even in one of those situations, you know, autonomy's there. Nobody's asking them to do this.
Yeah.
But it's just, hey, we want to be committed to. Is there a recommendation? This is where you start.
I would start with experts. Here's what I tell pastors when they call me. Either they call me wanting to be proactive, meaning, hey, ran across your all stuff. We want to, before this happens in our church, we want to put together some safeguards and stuff. What would you recommend? Or them calling me after something has happened tragically and saying, what do we do? I say the same thing to both. I don't know if you did, but I didn't have classes in seminary on how to, I'm a theologian. That's what I am. I'm an exegetical theologian. Like that's what they taught me in seminary. I'm not a trauma informed therapist. I'm not a police officer who knows and enforces the law. I'm not a Rachel Denholland or Boz Chivigian who, from a legal perspective, does this world. I'm a pastor, and it's okay for you all to say, I have no idea how to do this, and we are going to ask the people that know how to do it. Nobody's expecting you to know all the ins and outs of creating a church or institution that is safeguarded or responds well to sexual abuse. That's not who God, that's not what you're equipped and trained to do. So quit acting like you need to be an expert in this. And it's just okay to say, I'm going to ask people who actually know what they're talking about. and I'm gonna let them guide me. So, I don't know, any pastor that has ever had the report stuff, they've all told me, man, the police are so helpful. Like, I was scared to call, but man, the authorities they walked me through things. They told me stuff I didn't know. The investigator in our case, he was so helpful, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing, but he walked me through everything. Reading resources out there from people like Rachel, contracting with Grace, Godly Response to Abuse in the Christian Environment, contracting with folks like this, investing the funds that it takes to get trained in this way, bringing in trauma-informed specialists and say, all right, for the whole weekend, you have our leadership. Tell us what we need to know. Just getting that outside expert help, to inviting them into your church, so that you can learn how to do this well, because you don't know how to do it well. And that's okay to just admit that and say, look, this is not my expertise.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Robert, this has been so great. Thanks for taking the time. How can, tell us about your podcast, and then tell us how listeners can connect with you online.
Yeah, sure. Podcast is Every Square Inch, taken from Abraham Kuyper. I'm a Kuyperian guy when it comes to culture and engagement. Comes from his famous lectures that there's not a square inch over which the risen Jesus does not declare mine. And so that's kind of that podcast is my outlet to do public thought. So honestly, it's just my musings on things. I do have one. I think you mentioned I did record. If you want all my thoughts on this in a much more clear and concise, well-organized way than my ramblings on your podcast, I did record a podcast on sexual abuse crisis in the church that has all of my thoughts and responses to all of this. But yeah, anyway, Every Square Inch podcast. What was your other question? How they connect me online? I platform-wise, I do most of my engagement on Twitter at TCPC Robert. That's about the only social media platform that I do much engagement. We keep our Instagram stuff to our friends with all our kids, and then I don't do much on Facebook. And I'm not that active on Twitter, but I'll hop on there and tweet a few times a week. But anyway, you can find me there, and our church's website, tcpca.org.
Great. And we'll link to that episode. We'll link to the podcast, everything you've said. We'll put it in the show notes so people can find it. Hey, Robert, thanks so much. It's been great.
Hey, thank you.